Yeah. Our first panel discussion is on the topic regulatory reforms and investor perspectives. For that, I would like to invite our moderator, Ajit Krishnan, tax partner, EY India, and our panelists, Shri Sudhakar Deshmukh, Director, Complaint Management, Maharera, Sandeep Parekh, Managing Partner, FinSec Law Advisor, Devi Shankar, Head Real Assets and Family Office Investments, CBRE, and Girish Singhi, Founder, Grace Capital, to kindly join us on the dais. A round of applause.
Okay, thank you. And the timer starts. But thank you, Devi, Girish, Mr. Sudhakar, and Sandeep for joining this conversation. I think, obviously we've seen a lot of positive, encouraging motivation to go into tokenization, which is probably the potential for the future. But I guess being in the audience and what most people always think about is what could go wrong. And also what will it take to actually realize the full potential. So just to set some context, I thought it would be good if we can just open it up to all the panelists to just quickly give us their perspective on what do they really think tokenization is. Is it just a technology layer on top of an investment product, or is it actually going to change the way title in real estate is to be owned? How do assets get owned? Is there a what's some of your views on that?
Hello.
Yeah.
Basically, if we think regarding the land or any real estate asset, and the manner of transferring the titles of these such type of properties, we have to register the document, we have to make conveyance deed, and hence tokenization, mostly this is just the adoption of the technology and applying the technical layer basically. And to apply blockchain technology as well as securitizing the digital data and then to adopt the system, this is expected in blockchain in India particularly. I think Parekh sir will add in it something.
No, so I think I'm going to be the cynic today, so let me be the cynic on the panel.
We agreed on that.
No, so I think tokenization is really the wrapper in the technology. It doesn't kind of bypass and overrule all the statutory laws in India. So we have to go with caution, and I think Shan correctly has started from Gift City, which is a safe place which provides a basis to start. The other successful places are places like Singapore, again city-state, small place where you start with institutional players. So broadly, my sense is land itself is a very complex subject, right? Even the constitution kind of divides it between the center and the state. So RERA is the classic example. It's a hybrid between the center and the state. Land titles are a state subject, but transfer of property is a central subject. So that's why it's a very big mishmash of laws. The second aspect is it very often many of these schemes, and I say schemes with deliberation, is they fall into SEBI's definition of either a security or a collective investment scheme. And therefore all the regulatory requirements of registration with SEBI, the kind of trusteeship, the supervision, all of that apply. And this is, I think, very important because regulators and the government correctly so are very cautious about any kind of collective scheme, which means effort of others, profit motive, and kind of many of these multi-layer schemes have those characteristics. So we've had EMO farms, teak farms. So it's going to pull a lot of the crooks into this field. So I think the way to look at this would be to start from a sandbox approach, look at institutional players, make sure you give kind of a protected space to for innovation to happen, and then of course over the period of years, I think, kind of roll it out.
Sure. So maybe we can switch gears. Devi and Girish, mis-selling. Sandeep talked about it fairly eloquently, but I guess mis-selling is a very standard issue across financial sector. And like he mentioned, the teak plantation scheme and the land scheme and gold scheme, I don't know, we've lived through a lot of that history, and it keeps resurfacing occasionally. So, is there a preferred governance structure if we are going to move into a tokenized environment where you're really bringing the value down to a very small amount? What can be some safeguards, or what is your perception, or how would investors react to mis-selling, and how would you actually deal in a virtual environment?
So, I'm audible?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear? Okay, yeah, this is fine. So, my name is Girish. I'm very happy to be here. See, having managed and looked at institutional investors for a long period of time, tokenization is a layer, a technology layer of economic interest or investors' interest in an underlying asset. This layer does not make the asset good or bad. Like Ajit saying, like, what are the safeguards, right? Because they are basically in any institutional investors, and even when it applies to retail, essentially 3 or 4 questions people ask. What is the asset I'm owning? What are my rights? Who owns the cash flows? What is the governance structure? How will my exits take place? Now, those are very asset-specific situations, right? Now, all of these can be solved by proper regulatory. One of the questions can be solved by regulatory governance. Second question can be solved by making this, rolling it out gradually, making it accessible to people who understand it, like qualified investors, clearly defining the rights which the investors own, and having a legal and regulatory framework. And also, as like somebody also mentioned, that you may be owning units or economic interest, but you may still not be owning the land, because land is a straight subject. So you have to have utmost clarity in terms of what rights do you actually own. And you may or may not actually be owning the underlying land. So as long as you are clear in terms of what rights you own, what are the cash flows, what will happen in case of disputes. So as long as those things are clear, I think it will potentially do very well.
Yeah, so I completely agree with Girish, and even what Mr. Parekh said, like he started off saying real estate is a very complex subject, right? So, like I can talk in terms of, couple of things that I'm working on right now. If you just take those examples, like there's a hospitality asset that I'm working on. For instance, if you have to tokenize that, currently we are under due diligence for that. And, the complexities are as, drilled down as not even having the land subdivided in the revenue records. Some of the documents, legal documents, having CTS numbers like 100 ABC, but the other property documents having the same CTS numbers as Kirkagh, and we are sitting and reconciling ABC to Kirkagh. So, it's that complicated in India today. So, when you have such a complicated asset, and like Girish rightly said, like we don't know the underlying land ownership. There are so many different structures in India, like tenancy structures where, the building owners are just tenants, but the underlying land belongs to someone else. Or you may have like, a 100-year lease, which could be a private lease, government lease. And then in that case, what are you tokenizing exactly? So these are all extremely complicated topics when it comes to tokenization for real estate. I think tokenization can work really well for absolutely clean assets, because then there is complete transparency. But the moment we get into, complicated assets, which is a majority of the assets in India, I think the amount of transparency, due diligence is so important that even a small mistake can lead to lack of trust in the concept or in the product itself. So yeah, I do believe that transparency is very important. When you have these tokenized assets, the second thing is the ease of technology. because we have all heard of cases where in case of cryptos, people getting locked out of their accounts and not being able to access their money. So the whole blockchain concept, the familiarity with that is all something that, needs a lot of education and acceptance. So I honestly feel that tokenization is a great product for assets, hard assets like art and whiskey and other assets. But when it comes to real estate, I think we still have a fair amount of work to do before we can actually generalize that asset class.
Got it. So, Mr. Deshmukh, you're obviously handling RERA, and one of the reasons why RERA came into life was the entire concept of mis-selling. The brochure said something, reality was something else. The brochure promised a lot of things, fancy things, but in reality what the customer got was something else. And that's probably the genesis of RERA in some sense. So, now people talk about guaranteed returns, assured returns, so many other things. So how would all of that play out in a tokenized environment for real estate?
Basically, tokenization is the very new subject, and it is new to world also. There are very few examples, successful examples of Dubai or Singapore, and very few examples in USA as well as in European countries also. Very few properties or in very small or pilot project like things are done in tokenization. And in India, it is quite a different thing. We are going to discuss those issues also. But if we see role of RERA and tokenization, two things are different. RERA came into picture that we have to control the market, which is selling the units by the real estate agents, by the promoters or real estate agents. But selling and buying, that is quite different than this tokenization. Tokenization is the total digital market. And digital market, when we have to open the doors of digital market, in that case, the data shall be proper. Like Devi Madam told that there are several issues. If you see, there are litigations and litigations. There are around 63 to 67% litigations are civil litigations are only regarding the land matters. And also, if we see litigations at the offices of revenue department, in that department also several litigations are pending. And many people say that Satbara or such extracts changes in day on the table of Tahsildar also. Such type of things are there. And the tokenization expects that data shall be appropriate data, that shall be properly digitized, that shall be maintained on blockchain technology, and then the ledger shall be maintained, and every entry shall be properly maintained, and that shall be transparent. Data shall be secured. Like that, expectations are there in tokenization. Basically, such tokenization is to be done by the government, and accordingly the government is taking necessary steps also. Government of Maharashtra, I think in last month, Honorable Chief Minister has declared that we will be the first state to start tokenization of the real estate. And like that, government is doing several things, but RERA is quite different regulatory. Actually, it came into existence as per the 7th schedule of the Constitution, that is concurrent list, that Transfer of Property Act. As per that, RERA came into existence. And RERA is only controlling these three factors: purchasers, sellers in the sense promoter and agents. Only three things are being controlled. But other controls that are transfer of property, the revenue department, then town planning department, several departments are working there. But RERA has no control over such departments.
Got it. And so, we keep, like Mr. Deshmukh pointed out, Singapore, Dubai are good examples. They're pretty early on the start. And you made the point, Singapore is a city-state, so can it really address India complexity? But can India actually rely on their regulatory structure and say, can we actually import anything from there at all? Or is it like a complete fresh start, like what IFSCA is doing in the regulatory sandbox? But when you try to take it out of GIFT and bring it into the mainland, can we actually import anything at all from any other country, or do we really take a fresh piece of paper and start afresh?
Basically, we see the model of Singapore or Dubai. Both models are different models. And in Singapore, they form the special purpose vehicle. And that special purpose vehicle owns the property. And the fractional ownership of that property is being transferred to the purchaser or the investor. We will say in the language as an investor. And the investor get the fractional ownership, and in that case they are getting the benefit of the appreciation of the asset or the rent or any income receiving from that asset. In Dubai, land is owned by the land department of Dubai, and they have totally digitized their data. Both countries have digitized their data placed on blockchain technology. In Dubai, the land, these real estates are tokenized, and they are sold in the market, but they are controlled by the separate VARA, we say, that is a virtual real estate, कुछ तो regulatory authority is there. VRA कुछ है. That regulatory authority is controlling every transaction of real estate tokenization in Dubai. In India, the situation is quite different, and our land title keeping method is different than both the countries. Land is owned by the person, and hence everybody thinks that if we start tokenization, then ownership is being transferred. But it is not so easy. There is only the transfer of the economic fractional economic right is getting transferred to the person, and he gets such a benefit from that real estate asset.
Got it. So one of the things that state government, and so now I'll just want to get some more perspective from a government standpoint, and then we'll go into legal and investors. But stamp duty is one of the biggest revenue sources. Now you tokenize all of real estate transactions. How are you going to levy stamp duty? And it's a big revenue source, right? For all state governments. No state government is going to leave it.
Basically, in the state of Maharashtra, stamp duty income is around 10 to 15% of the income of the state. And really, if we go for tokenization, and if we know we will not find any alternative way to get the income, it will hamper the budget income of the state. And hence, first of all, when we regulate the tokenization process or anything, the transaction, first of all, it is necessary to define whether the token will be considered as a security, which is being considered today as a control of SEBI or anything that is being done by REIT or anything. Or shall it term as a contract, or shall it term as a transfer of the property? These are three things. If we define by the new regulation that what is exactly the tokenization and then transfer of the or such investments, and in that case, it is necessary to define how that income can be compensated by that conversion of or transfer of the properties, that rights, and then that income shall compensate the state budget, so that there will be no issue.
Got it. So Sandeep, that's a segue to you. So is it really a security? Is it a contract? What would it be legally?
Yeah, so before that, just on a humorous note, I think states will all support tokenization till they realize that, stamp duty revenues are going to be hit. But, so suddenly they will become analog.
The only thing is they can't expect 7% on every tokenization transaction. That would really kill it.
No, so before I come to your question, I think fundamental principle of stamp duty is it doesn't levy duty on a transaction. It levies duty on a document, right? But after the Information Technology Act 2000, even digital documents are considered to be. Okay, so let me come to the legal side of it, and I think it's, again, I don't want to get into the constitutional difference between, what is state and what is central. But just simplify it into, I guess, two buckets. One is, I think, get into the regulated space. So REITs, mini REITs, AIFs, all these other pooled structures. I think that's the cleanest way to do tokenization, and then you can always, put the wrapper of. Outside of that, there are really two ways to do it. One is a transfer of asset by way of contract. Now that's a very difficult subject because you cannot transfer any immobile asset more than 100 rupees without registration. Okay. So registration itself is, you have to go through the entire, registration process, go to the registrar's office and transfer asset. So when you're actually buying an asset, a fractional asset, whether it's on the blockchain or not, you actually not owning the asset at all, right? You are, if and when there's liquidation, you may stand as a creditor in line after everybody else is paid off. So you're not an equity owner of the asset at all, legally speaking, right?
Okay.
So you'll have to deal with RERA, you may have to deal with consumer forums, and most likely IBC as well, which is insolvency. So it's not a happy situation, right? In practice, legally, you can enforce contracts and stuff. The third option really is to kind of get into kind of something completely else outside of it, which is something which looks like what I mentioned earlier: pooling of assets, profit motive, work of others, and that's the classic definition of investment contract or CIS, collective investment scheme. And that gets into unregulated SEBI space. So people, again, coming from the teak plantation example, and then again you'll face heat from SEBI in terms of requiring registration, but so you're legally required to register, but you have not, and therefore they'll come after you. We've had the whole Sahara case where similar arguments were made, right? I think the takeaway really is. The way for it to work practically has to be, work in a small institutional framework, in a sandbox, allow institutions to come in, socialize the project, and then create guardrails. How would you, even within the sandbox, that it doesn't, it's not a magnet for Ponzi schemes really, right? So how do you create those guardrails, consumer protection, disclosure norms, related party transactions, all of those things which you see in a prospectus. Suffice it to say that I think it has to start from sophisticated people and then socially, socialize it and then slowly move into the retail space. But like I said, our laws really are not even 20th century, right? Transfer of property contract. They're all 19th century laws that we're trying to adopt technologies which happened just a few years back. So it really doesn't fit today. Whether it should fit, certainly it should fit. And at the end, I'll quote you a very interesting ruling from the Supreme Court from just 4-5 months back where it talks of tokenization. But I'll come back to that.
Okay. So one of the things is also where does liability sit, right? In the mis-selling environment. So like you said, in a contract structure or a security structure, if it's more like a creditor, you really don't own the property, but that's the assumption with which, like Mr. Bansal was saying, can I own a piece of Nepean Sea Road?
Yeah.
Now, does he really own a piece of Nepean Sea Road? That's what he believes and that's what he's buying. But if it doesn't turn around, then where does the liability sit? Is it really at the investor itself for not understanding this?
So liability would sit depending on in which of those three buckets you get into, right? So if you're a registered product, certainly, you have all the disclosures, all the safeguards, there's an investor protection fund, and, SEBI is looking at that. If it's a contract, you really kind of, you stand last in queue really in an insolvency process where you're a creditor, you're not the owner of the asset. And the third is, of course, enforcement action if it falls within the collective investment scheme, in which case you may get some SEBI protection, but again, unlikely that SEBI would want to kind of protect people beyond a point, right? Sahara, they really didn't find the investors also. So I think there's no kind of, frankly, there's no framework except in the sandbox situation where you have very sophisticated means of enforcing guardrails, investor protection, disclosures, related party protections, And like I said, by law, you cannot transfer any immobile asset. You can transfer less than 100 rupees. but above 100 rupees, you need registration.
Which means the value is capped at 100. Huh? So even if a subsequent trade can't be done beyond 100.
You can buy that 1 rupee plot in Nepean Sea Road, which you mentioned.
Till it appreciates to 100. After that, you can't even trade it. so yeah, that's a complexity. So one last, maybe a suggestion from your side. So is there, because obviously in this environment where we are trying to move from an analog environment into a digital environment, especially in the context of real estate, there will be this urge to come up with a shortcut, right?
Yep.
So is there a shortcut that you would seriously tell or suggest has to be avoided under all circumstances?
No, so there is no shortcut, unfortunately. But let me read that the case. It's a 5-month-old case from the Supreme Court, which actually talks of tokenization. I'll just read 2 sentences.
Sure.
And then I'll give you the names. Anybody who's interested can look it up. It's Samiullah versus State of Bihar. And it says, again, it looks at, all the problems with not being able to transfer property efficiently. And it says, fortunately, due to technology, I'm reading from the judgment, Supreme Court ruling. Fortunately, due to technological advancement, this process is duly and more accurately achievable. We have incorporated emerging technologies as instruments of institutional reform. Blockchain technology has garnered particular attention for its potential to transform land registration into a more secure, transparent, tamper-proof system. It suggested that the adoption of blockchain technology would ensure immutability, transparency, and traceability, thereby minimizing fraud and unauthorized alterations. And it goes on about blockchain. And finally, it says that it's recommending to the government to send it to the Law Commission to look at adopting these technologies for the immutability part. That the land, today land title is not good enough. It's not showing you actual title. It's actually, what has been registered, etc. And that's why when you try to buy a property, they ask you for 100 years or 50 years worth of agreements which back it. And that's the reason. So, multiple states are trying to go forward with that. I think Mr. Deshmukh know a lot better.
Most of the states has tried to start the pilot projects for blockchain using blockchain technology. In that, Andhra Pradesh and then Telangana, Maharashtra, much ahead. Basically, in Maharashtra, Gadchiroli, the pilot project was run. In Andhra Pradesh, Visakhapatnam, it was run, and most of the data is digitized. And in Andhra Pradesh, they are trying to do in Hyderabad, and they have basically first of all collected the information regarding the government lands, and then they are doing for other lands also.
Okay, that's interesting. So let's switch gears. So maybe since you advise on a lot of these transactions, is tokenization really solving a real world problem, or is it, what is it trying to solve? Is it a capital market? Is it the lack of access to capital market for real estate that you hope to solve? What are we trying to achieve here if you are an investor?
I would ask the same question. So, at least for income yielding assets today, we have REITs. We have SM REITs as well. The fact is that today SM REITs don't have a very high trading volume. So clearly, the acceptability in terms of, giving liquidity, I don't think it has solved it to such an extent. REITs have been widely accepted, both by institutional investors like the mutual funds and insurance companies or HNIs who come in bulk, and by the retail investor who are buying units of the REITs. So REITs, I would say, has got wide acceptability. Tokenization helps, like Mr. Bansal said, a property in Nepean Sea Road, which is not income generating because they don't fall under the REIT regulations. So tokenization kind of helps in getting access to growth assets within real estate. It is basically another form of securitization, the way I look at it, with a slightly more complex technological back end to it. That's where I would think tokenization can help. I don't believe that the large bulge bracket investors, whether it's institutions or HNIs, would really invest in tokens, because from my experience, most of these investors want control of the asset. They are looking at control of the physical asset, being able to manage the asset being able to dilute their stake when they want. So they want operating control on the asset, which in tokenization is not possible. So my sense is tokenization can help, like we heard before, access to capital to the retail investors, bringing assets which were earlier not available to retail investors. Having said that, again, and this is a very conservative view, and I could be proven wrong with time, but if I'm living in Mumbai and I get a tokenized asset in Bangalore, I may not really opt for it, because a lot of investors play on familiarity. So even in that sense, access to capital, it's primarily local capital that you may want to tap into. So I don't know if at this stage tokenization, at least for commercial assets, is solving a problem which REITs are not solving. Today, a lot of institutional capital is available for commercials at the development stage, and then they can be flipped to REITs. So yeah, I don't think as of date tokenization is really solving a major problem in India.
Got it. So you, like you said, the high net worth individuals and institutions don't really care about tokenization. Now, does that
And I'd be happy to hear Girish's view, because he's actually going to become an investor. He's a fund manager, so I'd be happy to hear his views as well.
But what do they really care about then? If it's not about this fractional ownership, what in your sense, is it governance, cash? What do they really care?
Like I said, control. They want control over the asset.
Okay.
They want to see visibility of, how the asset will be maintained. If there are too many owners, that kind of dilutes, the ability to manage the asset, ability to exit at some point in time. If I own 100%, I will sell the asset at any time. 100% of the asset always gets better liquidity, better value at any point in time than selling a fractional stake.
But that assumes there is an equally high net worth individual there to buy, right? Isn't that market restricted or?
No, today there's so much domestic capital available, right? From 50 crore to 1,000 crore, there's enough non-institutional domestic capital, private capital, which is available. So for grade A assets, there is no liquidity challenge in the country today. So for me, I think it's primarily about control.
And therefore, tokenization is only trying to democratize, or at least it's an attempt to democratize that opportunity for a retail participant. But
That's
governance,
right.
how do you figure that?
So it at the most helps. So if I'm an institution and I want to look at another way of exiting the asset at some point in time, I may wish to tokenize it and keep it so that I can list it in whatever platform.
Right.
And that's one of the modes for exit. But the challenge always over there will be that I'm able to monetize part of the tokens and I'm left with part of the tokens. So that's always going to be a challenge. So if I have to choose an exit mechanism, I would rather choose 100% exit to another strategic investor than go the tokenization route.
Got it. Girish, you want to pick that up?
So see, let's just jog our memory. Even today now, strata titles, forget multiple investors. Even if you have two investors and one guy owns 90% and one guy owns 10%, there is limited acceptance even for strata title in India. So when you have multiple owners, that kind of asset class, I don't think is meant for institutions. It may be meant for retail. The other aspect is it's just a layer, right? Eventually, you need the asset. You need an asset of high quality. You need cash flows, governance, exit, the legal structures. You will potentially not end up owning land. So I think it is more riskier compared to owning 100%. And I like Devi mentioned that if you have a high quality asset anywhere in India today, there is enough suitors for that asset. And now people are telling us that a lot of flood of capital is going to come from Dubai to India, given the situation there is. So it's a layer. It still to be seen. And institutional investors honestly don't care about what is the technology layer. They care about the quality of the asset, the quality of the sponsor, the quality of the governance, the quality of the exit, the ownership, and those kind of legal structure, rather than the technology layer. And in fact, having more investors or more owners on the cap table complicates the thing for institutions rather than simplifies for retail. Of course, it may be interesting to get access to asset which otherwise was not accessible.
Yeah. So let's stay optimistic that there is retail interest, which genuinely is, like Mr. Bansal said, right? Driving past Nepean Sea Road, you want to be able to own it, but it's unaffordable. It's out of reach. So if we were to democratize that ownership, what's really if let's say liquidity is a big opportunity, right? Because you can actually sell per square feet. You could tokenize down to a square feet level, right? You don't have to have 10,000 square feet to find a tenant for yourself. If you're owning strata, you can own 1 square feet and hope that the rent of that 1 square feet is coming to you. Is that good, bad? How do you think about it?
So we have to distinguish, is it liquidity or it's illusion of liquidity?
Okay.
Because if the asset is bad, there won't be buyers, right? And especially if there's price discovery, the asset can also go down very fast if the asset is not. So in fact, it can also work reverse. So ultimately, it all comes down to the quality of the asset. If the asset is good, there'll be liquidity, there'll be buyers, and the price will go up. But if the asset is bad, the liquidity actually won't be there. And which, even if you look at even SM REITs or any structures where the underlying assets are not good, there isn't much liquidity. Even in private InvITs also.
Got it. So what about foreign capital? Because like you said, the control is very important. But if you were to scale it down and look at all our NRI diaspora, which wants to be participating in the real estate story, but finds it difficult, right? Either you own the entire property or you don't. That's complicated. But, I'm assuming the Terrazzo platform kind of an option. If it was for NRIs, then they can participate through that in the real estate story. So do you see that as a big thing or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I mentioned earlier as well, I think this is where tokenization really helps, is giving access to people who otherwise did not have access, and giving access to assets which otherwise people did not have access to. Like I said, commercial is largely in REITs, but residential, and there are many other asset classes in real estate which may not fall under the REIT bucket. Where there could be a very good growth opportunity, where we believe that the value appreciation could be quite high. So it does give access to people, largely I would say the retail to maybe the 10 to 20 crore kind of ticket sizes. Beyond that, I have my doubts, but at that level, I think there'll be a lot of interest for somebody to participate in these kind of assets.
Ajit, I think there's also an opportunity to tokenize already structures like an AIF, or you could potentially tokenize AIF. Now, of course, if you're a qualified investor, of course, your ticket size goes down. But if you tokenize an AIF or like venture capital, or if you tokenize a fund itself, that creates a better opportunity, because then investor gets access to multiple assets versus getting access to one asset. So that can be an opportunity.
Fair. No, that's a good point. I know we're running against the clock. But I was trying to see, and I know I had a lot of questions that I sent to you. Hopefully we can make a white paper out of answers from you on those questions and send it around. But, so what is that? Maybe we'll just pick one question, and Mr. Deshmukh, do you think states will give up stamp duty to help improve liquidity and multiple rounds of transactions through tokens?
Basically, as state declared that the Maharashtra will be the first state in tokenization. It is already might have thought at the higher level, and they will give up stamp duty or search for any alternative. But such innovative activity, government will take over it.
Understood. What's probably the one misconception about tokenization, Sandeep, that you want to correct today?
I think the biggest misconception is buying a token is equal to buying a property.
Okay.
You were actually a creditor to that entity, whichever entity. So it's actually a myth. Under Indian law, at least, under Indian Contract Act, you are actually, you do not own the property till there's a register. If you go to a registrar's office, the registrar is going to laugh his thing out. So you actually are just a creditor to whichever entity, and it's going to be pretty painful. If somebody's crooked, there's almost no chance you'll recover your money.
Got it. So Girish, you made this point that maybe we don't need to take it to the asset, but to the AIF or some similar structures. Arguably, would it not mean slowing down the pace of innovation?
No, I don't think so, because in India has never suffered from retailization of asset class. India suffered from mis-selling. So in fact, if we go slow and if we ensure that first it goes to REITs or SM REITs, to institutional investors before, and it tries and tests, and then eventually going to retail, that will be better, because there's so much mis-selling, and it will be better to go slower than be sorry and a lot of investors losing money.
Okay. So Devi, the last question for you. So if in 5 years what does success look for you for real estate tokenization? How would you define success?
5 years from now for tokenization. So I think if the retail investors can get comfort on tokenization, if there are enough platforms, enough high value, high grade assets that can come into the tokenization bucket, and retail investors are getting access to that, I think that will be a great success parameter for tokenization 5 years from now.
Okay. So I'll leave one thought. Unfortunately, all of this is going to be treated as virtual digital asset, which means it's a 30% tax, which otherwise is a 14% if you own the property. So I think it's going to start with a negative equity investment. And hence, distinguishing a virtual digital asset with a real asset, because like Sandeep is making a very valid point, it's not the asset. So that actually works against me when I go back to Ministry of Finance and say, no, it's not really a virtual asset, it's a real asset, it's just digitized. And he's going to turn up and say, no, there is no asset. There is an asset, but it's just a contract. So this is the complexity that we're going to deal with. But I think it's the next stage of innovation. I guess all of us concur on that. So if I were to summarize this, I think there is initiative at the state government level, there is interest from investors, but not institutional. There is an objective and there's clearly a path for democratizing investment in real estate. So this could be a big way, but there's a long way to go in terms of policy framework. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much everyone for that thought-provoking discussion. I request all the panelists and our moderator to please be present on the dais. I now request our Director General Sandeep Khosla to please present mementos to our panelists and moderator as a token of appreciation. A moderator for this panel discussion, Ajit Krishnan, tax partner EY India. A round of applause. Shri Sudhakar Deshmukh, Director, Complaint Management, Maharera. Sandeep Parekh, Managing Partner, FinSec Law Advisor. Devi Shankar, Head Real Assets and Family Office Investments, CBRE. And Girish Sanghi, Founder, Crest Capital. A big round of applause for our panelists and moderator.